Hi, Wendy.
Hi.
Welcome to the space. We are here today to introduce you to some people, maybe reintroduce you to others, help others get acquainted with you as you
Mhm.
embark on this journey of running for the president of the American Psychological Association. How are you feeling coming into the conversation today?
I'm feeling really, really good and also just excited to be in community with you, Carlton.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Thank you for inviting me to be a part of this, right?
Thank you.
Let's just jump in with our first question, right?
Okay.
Knowing that, we are psychologists and we are trying to attune to the community of psychologists, can you
Mhm.
share a personal story or experience that inspired your interest in psychology as well as your involvement in the American Psychological Association?
Mm, yes, I can. Gosh, I have always been curious about why people do the things that they do.
Mhm.
I'm still very curious. I'm a very adamant why asker, if you will. I'd want to know. And so, particularly around the phenomena of people, I mean, we're so, as a child, I was really interested in what was motivating folks. I remember when I finally had the language of the ego, I was so excited. I was like, that makes so much sense, like, of course, this person, blah, blah, blah. And so I think that that has just always sort of been core to me. It's who I am. I want to understand. I want to know. When I understand, there's room for um, I'm more patient, I'm more generous, and that's important for me.
Mhm.
As a young person, I was the one that people called to talk to about stuff. Um, I don't know why people chose me to be this person, but friends and mostly friends, um, our landline at home was very busy when I was a teenager with my friends calling me about their broken hearts or they're mad at their sibling or this or that. And I had always known that I was someone that people felt comfortable speaking to and that I liked helping if I could. I probably shared too much more opinion than I actually had life experience to share. But, there's likely in friendship as a kid something that was useful to my peers of being heard, being listened to, being taken seriously. And when I was in school, and in high school in particular, I had wonderful teachers, wonderful educators, and remember at one of the times we would like gather in a lunchroom or in a class, one of my teachers' classrooms during lunchtime, listening to music, playing games, things like that. And one of my teachers asked, what do you all want to do? And so everybody was sharing their responses, and I was like, I think I want to be a psychologist because I like to help people.
Mhm.
And so then, we all had a conversation around that. And I think that was me the first time that I said it out loud. I was 15 um, and in high school at lunchtime. So yeah, that was it.
Mhm. It sounds like it was an early ethic of curiosity and helping, right?
And
That
care. Yeah.
and care, right? That
Curiosity and care.
um,
That's probably fits very well for me. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. When you think about, becoming a psychologist and getting
Mhm.
into the American Psychological Association, talk to us about your involvement there and what sort of like drew you in to APA.
Yeah. I will say that I was interested, but I couldn't afford to be a member of the American Psychological Association as a grad student. I uh first generation college and grad school. Um I worked and I certainly probably could have figured it out, but I also had other priorities or things I was prioritizing in that way. I didn't really get deeply involved into APA until I became an early career professional. And I will tell you, it was because I was looking for connection and a place outside of my academic home, a professional home outside of my academic home, because I was a young Black woman, new professor, early career professor, and I was experiencing many of the microaggressions and things that we now have come to appreciate are just sort of a part of the experience, some of which I write and talk a lot about now. I was experiencing it as a 31 year old and very young, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Mhm.
And very, very green, and just needing some space, some third space other than some other space other than the professional space to make sense of it. So
Mhm.
I became a part of, I remember how it happened. I was at the NMCS in New Orleans before um, the one right after Hurricane Katrina. And
NMCS being the National Multicultural Conference.
yes, the National Multicultural Conference and Summit. Look at you now letting me do alphabet soup. So at the National Multicultural Conference and Summit in New Orleans, this was after Katrina. So we were also focused on doing some community improvement support work because, the community was in recovery. Some would argue it still is. And I was coming down an escalator and Gerda Nicola, this is what I'm trying
Oh,
to say.
okay.
Yes, I know you know as I'm like name
Yeah.
dropping on purpose. She was coming up and she says, Wendy, I need to talk to you. And I was like, how does she know my name? I because I felt very unknown and I just was trying to connect. And that conference was so great because so many of my classmates now, we're graduates, alum of our program, were there. And so she invited me to become involved with Section 1 of Division 35. So Division 35 is a Society for the Psychology of Women, and Section 1 is its first section, which is focused on Black women, psychology of Black women and girls. And so I got involved and I was the awards chair. So I really appreciate her because she plugged me in. And I've been plugged in ever since. Division 35, I know for a lot of folks, we talk about the number of divisions in APA and that it can feel a bit overwhelming. And because I was looking for home, I decided early to like really commit and connect and to develop relationships that would last over time and to really grow in that space because that's what I was needing as an early career professional. And so I've held different roles in 35 and ultimately have taken on other positions in governance in APA.
Mhm. It's really fascinating. I didn't know that you knew Dr. Nicola, right? And
Oh my gosh, yes.
her name. And thinking about who Dr. Nicola is in the world and how she moves, this is very consistent with
Yes.
how, right? It speaks to, in my opinion, the power of mentors and people who are
Yes.
always watching us in some ways and maybe watching out for us and maybe seeing a little bit farther for us than we can
Mm-hmm.
see for
Mm-hmm.
ourselves sometimes,
Oh
right?
gosh, for sure.
Yeah. So with that in mind, tell us about a mentor or a role model who's had a significant impact on you in your life, right? Both professionally and personally. And talk to us about what that person did, what they say that felt it
Mm.
affected you.
There's so many, Carlton. I almost feel like it's an embarrassment of riches in a way. Um,
Mm,
the one that comes to mind when you ask me that question right now is Dr. Jessica Henderson Daniel.
mm, mm,
Yeah, wow. At another National Multicultural Conference and Summit held in Atlanta,
mm,
Georgia. I believe that might have been 2015,
mm,
but I'm not exactly sure.
mm,
Um, our winter, what typically happens for some of the division meetings for some of the social justice focused divisions, 35, 17, 44, and 45,
mhm,
is that then they hold their midwinter meeting there, right? Because the summit happens around about January, February, depending on the year. And then the meetings happen either immediately preceding or after. Anyway, Division 35 was having our meeting and we were having dinner. We typically have one meal together. And I sat at a table close to Dr. Jessica Henderson Daniel. And she said, so what do you want to do? And I was so overwhelmed by that question. I was still an assistant professor. I was very active in Section 1 in many ways based on what I had said I was seeking and looking for in terms of my APA involvement. I'd gotten it. And for me, it wasn't career advancement or aspirations around that. It really was what my heart needed as a professional. And so I, I was dumbstruck. I really didn't have an answer. So she asked me again at an APA in Chicago. Uh, yeah. And she actually, this is when I was president of Section 1, or maybe I was becoming president of Division 35. It was around those times. And she was talking with a group of us about leadership and about just the presidency of Division 35. So I was not president yet of that. And also of APA. She had ran for APA 3 times before she was elected. And she really appreciated her telling and sharing that story because it placed that journey in context. Um,
mhm,
yeah, it placed that journey in context. Uh,
mm,
she's just such a wonderful mentor, such a she trusted me with the truth of aspects of her story so that I could understand what this could be or what it was.
Mhm.
And she also was talking to a group of other Black women because Section 1 had had some gathering where we invited her to talk with us about leadership and the journey and the trajectory. And she was running for APA president again. And she just was saying to us to imagine it, to imagine it. Now, of course, I felt like she was talking to everybody else but me. Because the imposter syndrome, and we understand what that's about, in terms of the cultural systems of domination that make some of us feel like we can be included and others not. I was really having a hard time seeing myself in that seat, but she was seeing me squarely in that seat. And at one point, we were talking on the phone a couple of years later, and she was like, "I need you to really seriously consider it," like very explicit. And
Mhm.
here I am doing it, right? But I think a lot about her and when you talk about people seeing things in you and seeding things. And I would say she didn't only plant the seed, she watered the plant, she
Yeah.
watched the dirt, she put me close to the window for some sun, she took care of me. Um, but continue to speak that on my life. And I really, really just think it's so important for us to be those types of people to our
Mhm.
students, to our colleagues who are younger than us, who are looking at us. And I guess what I will say too, especially with launching this run for the presidency, the number of people who told me that they were looking and I had no idea that they were. And so just to be mindful, I think that people are looking at you and they're watching how you move. They're gaining inspiration and also learning from your mistakes as well. And all is good. All of that is good.
Wow, what a story. I
I
didn't,
know.
I think I knew that you were connected to Dr. James, but I didn't know, right, how deep the connection was. It sounds really, I think that one of the things that really struck me in what it is that you were conveying was having run previously, her having run previously,
Yeah.
and standing up in front of folks and so, like talking about that story. Not to say that it wasn't maybe a public story, but
Yeah.
be able to stand in that and own that, right? Which is oftentimes a part of leadership, but we don't talk
Yeah.
about, right?
Yeah.
Some of
Yeah.
those setbacks or those failures or those
Yes.
things, right? And so
Yeah.
that's really powerful to be in space with her to have her model that
Yes, for
for
sure.
you all. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that actually.
Yeah.
When I experience you, Wendy, you tell stories a lot,
Do
right?
yeah.
Yeah, it's one of the
Okay.
ways, right, that you share,
Mhm.
information, that you share wisdom, that you share clarity
Mhm.
with people. I'm wondering if you could talk to us about how it is that as a young Black woman, right, growing up in your family, and when I say this because I hear you oftentimes talk about your family.
Yeah.
I wonder if you could talk about some of the important intergenerational lessons that
Mm.
have been passed down or you've passed along in the context of your family.
Yeah. Well, now that I'm middle-aged, I'm right in the middle, so I can pass down things and receive things.
Right.
The sandwich generation is what they call us, right? I learned how to lead from the women in my family.
Mm,
I have faith in my leadership, and I believe and I feel empowered in my leadership because of the men in my family.
mm,
Is how I would say that. And
mm,
it is intergenerational. There are things, and it's true for all of us, I believe. We are legacy. We are someone's legacy. Someone planned for us before they knew who we were. And I feel that so strongly
mm,
in my family and in my life,
mm,
from the types of sacrifices that my grandparents made, their trek across this country, their um, responding to making their attempt to make promises to us as a future generation and a nation that didn't keep its promises to them.
mhm,
Yeah. And so that's what I will say. And I would say that I feel especially grounded in the idea of my leadership from the women in my family because I come from that you can make a way. And I don't mean that in the sense of, you know, punishing yourself or harming yourself, trying to, you know,
Make a way.
uh, make a
Out of
way,
no
but
way,
literally, yeah, but
right?
literally, like you have a lot. It may not be what the society is naming as wealth or access or resource. And it's so vital and necessary. And what I will say too, particularly for this moment in our lives, in our nation story, in our global story, is it's that's the kind of leadership that I see as being particularly needed and valuable. And What I mean by that is that we're having to reimagine and to think through to create context for our survival that we didn't have to think about before.
Mm,
And that is what my ancestors did. That is what my grandmother, my great grandmother, my great great grandmother did. And they had to do
mm,
in order for me to be here. And so there are so many lessons in the family stories that are passed down. So one of those stories is my great great grandmother, Mary Vaughan. Uh, uh, and we come from the South, Arkansas, and there's a story in our family about one of her sons who was being pursued by the Klan in their community.
mm,
And my great great grandmother was a bootlegger. So she was financially independent and she was able to, she used the resources of the time. She sold her wares to Black and white people in the South. They knew where to get it. And I wrote about this in an article because I felt like it's really important to know your lineage. But essentially, the same men that were in business with my grandmother also were looking for her son.
mm,
Think about that. And came to her house looking for him, and she had hid him underneath the floorboards.
mhm,
And so that story sits with me. They didn't find him; they went away. She sent him up north um, to be safe, to friends and family up north. But it's those kinds of she made a way. She made a way for him to live another day. And those are just like stories of fugitivity in our life experience. Those are what I mean by the promises not kept
mm,
by this
mm,
nation. And
mhm,
I sit in a really interesting seat. I am an auntie. Everybody who knows me knows that I love being an auntie and a godmother so much. I just do. And so I have four beautiful girls who are my nieces and my nephew. I have one nephew and several godsons and girls, godsons and daughters. Yeah, my nieces, though, I am deeply invested in them. They're very, gosh, just gorgeous women, gorgeous young women, gorgeous girls. I don't want to adultify them. Um, they're so strong in their own way and so vulnerable in their own way. And so I pass down
mhm,
to them, is that trust in your voice and trust in your strength while also allowing yourself to be soft. The
mm,
sadness for me is watching so many women of my generation only recently appreciating that they don't have to be hard all the time. And so I think like these are things that are so important. I live into that. I value that so incredibly. I know that when people experience me, they may, or project onto me likely a sense of strength because
mm,
I am strong. I am. I know that.
mhm,
But also that's a part of a stereotype that the society is comfortable projecting onto me. And I recognize that too. But
mhm,
there are these other elements of self that are so critical and important for us to have a balanced life and to really cultivate the space and create joy and love in our spaces. You can't have joy and love necessarily in those hard spaces. And so though the society might require that, that doesn't mean that that's who you have to become. And so I'm really mindful of modeling that for my baby girls, is what I call them, and helping them to do the double dutch with both because they need to in order to keep their own humanity, not for anybody else, but for
mm,
themselves.
for
And they have
themselves.
their own version of
Right.
that.
Yeah. How do they helping them to think about protecting their own dignity, right?
Oh gosh,
Guarding
yes,
their own dignity
yes.
so that nobody